because everyone wants to see every one of my gray hairs. It'll happen one day, Josh. It'll happen. You still look very youthful and vibrant, though. All right, we have this great. I have to get used to the reveal too with these nice thumbnails that they've given us. It's all professional. It's all very professional now. I try to be professional. All right, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Where will Deshaun Watson be week 1? That and more this week on the couch. Josh Norris, in your crystal ball, when you look ahead to week 1, which is getting closer every day, where's Deshaun Watson?
Not on an NFL football field. Absolutely not. I feel like before we say anything about Deshaun Watson, somehow in all these conversations, if they work for the NFL Network, if they work for any other network, we need to lead with there are 22 civil suits against Deshaun Watson right now. That is something that needs to be headlined in any conversation about Deshaun Watson and his availability, because that's not some minor thing that should be overlooked to our pleasure to get him on a field. No,
right.
That important 22 lives out there, that needs to be handled before we have even a conversation. I don't care what's going on behind closed doors with any of these NFL teams. I'm sure that they are discussing it because we know that they care about one thing, it's winning and it's money. But a few things need to be handled before even my brain allows me to think of Deshaun Watson playing football again.
I think that's fair. I mean, I think that so where we end up on thin ice, if you will, Josh, is that yet we still hold ourselves out as able to predict the future.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, that's what we do. I really, this year in 2021, I've grasped this as the job description for us fantasy football experts. That we pretend to be able to predict the future. We're soothsayers, fortune tellers. And I agree with you. So now we're talking about rational coaching, rational discipline, rational approach to PR situations, right? And what do we know about the NFL? They're not proactive. The NFL is never proactive. They want someone else to act, except about vaccines. But that's a whole other show, and that's a whole other thing, which in and of itself could be a very fascinating topic for us to delve into. That was strange, but here we are. Rick Dennison's going to stay with Minnesota, by the way, so that got cleared up. So the NFL is not going to be proactive. They have not put him on the exempt list. Now, Roger Goodell has the power to put him on the exempt list while we're talking right now for no reason. But if he's not on the exempt list now, then something has to change. It can be something known only to the NFL, but something has to change for him to get on the exempt list. And let's be fair, that's probably the best solution for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Watson gets
set
paid
up the entire season.
Right, on the exempt list. Watson gets paid. The Texans don't have to deal with him, and the NFL doesn't have to answer any questions. Because I almost wonder if Watson's reporting to camp, not just to get those fines off the books, but to force the NFL to do something. Because the NFL, if Watson didn't report to camp, the NFL could just sit there and whistle through the graveyard and nothing would have to change.
Yeah.
Maybe something has to change, maybe it doesn't.
I don't think anything has changed, Sig.
No.
And this past week, we hear more about it, but then I also heard a lot about it prior to the draft on one of my first shows with Charles Robinson. We talked about it. We talked about teams that would be interested. The Miami Dolphins, the Carolina Panthers. We didn't mention the Eagles at the time, but they're up there. And I feel like the only thing that has changed is that he reported, and that's because of the new CBA that was, signed into existence a year ago, right? And I think this is the first case like this that has happened since then. So maybe there are some different protocols. So to me, nothing has changed.
Right.
And I would be absolutely shocked if he plays this season. Beyond shocked, if there's a word for that. Maybe you know it for me.
Sure.
If he plays mid-season, if he only gets a 6 to 8 week suspension. I mean, 22 cases, Sigmund.
Right.
We know, and I'm not trying to speculate, but we know that NFL players, maybe there's a better phrase for this, but their bodies are temples in a lot of ways.
Sure.
Like they care so much about them that they only trust certain people with it. That's why they can become so loyal to certain trainers or people they grew up with. Think about signing up and going to 22 different massage therapists. Like that's what doesn't connect.
That in and of itself. Well, but the NFL is conducting their own investigation. They have been conducting their own investigation. The NFL looks after their interests. The NFL has people on staff that might have access to information that local law enforcement doesn't get access to. The NFL, and Tom Pelissero made sure to spell this out when some of this Watson stuff broke earlier this week. The NFL, at least at this moment, has not seen fit in their last investigation what they have found to put him on the exempt list. Now, they still can, but there were options for Goodell to put Watson on the exempt list as soon as the allegations broke, or at some point as the allegations amassed, but he hasn't.
Yeah.
So I guess
there's a lot of steps that still have to happen. I mean, he has to settle.
Well, the exempt list, it's imperial power. He can just decree it.
Correct.
He can do it at any moment for any reason.
I think part of it, and this all gets so muddied, I think part of it is that the 22 people have not complied with requests to be interviewed with the NFL because the lawyer did not like where the questioning was going.
Right.
And so if that's the case, then the NFL doesn't feel like they can get a full grasp on it.
Right.
It would be stunning to see. In my brain, I'm already at the conclusion that he sits out the entire year. And then there will be a bidding war for him at some point. Right. I think also the point here is teams understand that there's going to be a bidding war for him, and they don't want to be late to that. They don't want to be late to what the Rams did with Matthew Stafford this past January, when Kyle Shanahan and whoever else were in Cancun, I guess Sean McVay was as well, but that was just a random night in January. And so maybe teams try to cut that early on. And I think you've seen some forward thinking teams prepare for this. I mean, it's not a chance. It is by plan that the Philadelphia Eagles got an extra first-round pick in this year's in the 2022 draft.
How interesting would it be, by the way, Josh, if that trade, the Jalen Waddle trade, determines where Deshaun Watson plays the rest of his career anyway?
Yeah, it wasn't just happenstance that they acquired more picks in next year's draft. It was by plan. I don't think that Jalen Hurts is going to be the long-term starter there unless he does something outrageous in 2021. And you also can look back at the history of the Eagles and their quarterback position, where you go from Don McNabb to Michael Vick, right? I mean, that's aiming for the stars when that was a distressed asset in Michael Vick. Then you had Sam Bradford, and you still move up into the top 10, the top 2 to go and get Carson Wentz. You had the starter, and then you shoot for the stars, aim for the stars, and get Carson Wentz. It's not a team that is just happy with how it is until they get someone that they think is at the peak or could be at the peak of their position.
And as it has been kind of bizarrely floated out there, Josh, teams can trade for Watson right now. Yeah. You too can trade for Watson right now if you're okay with not knowing what's going to happen. So, I mean, if I understand that is teams can make the Texans offers for pennies on the dollar, and the Texans can say no. But until this gets settled, he's not going to get traded. I mean, that would be more astonishing. When we go into the vocabulary, I would be more astonished if Watson gets traded while this is still open-ended than I would if he plays week 1. And I guess the question with week 1 is it just one of those things that the universe, the football gods decree he just won't play some way or another? The commissioner will step in. The Texans will do some arrangement where he gets paid but just doesn't play. He calls in sick like Jalen Ramsey. Something will keep it so that he's
not playing week 1.
Here's the only reason that I all of a sudden have become fascinated by this possibility, Josh. Okay, as of right now, the status quo is Watson's in the building. He's getting paid. Yeah. So something has to change for him to not suit up in week 1. But
on his own accord, he's not playing for the Texans. Like he has said
but then why show up at camp
to not get fined? So I think
isn't he going to get fined if he doesn't play games too? I mean, don't the Texans have an even bigger financial incentive to hold over him for him to play this year? Unless the Texans just aren't interested in that. Anyway, we can exhaust ourselves with all this. And I think what it traces out the picture is that there's just uncertainty stacked on uncertainty stacked on uncertainties. And I understand what's guiding you. I'm not going to put words in your mouth. But I think there is a sense, a lot of people I've talked about this with, is it just doesn't make sense for him to play for the Texans this year in any way, shape, or form based on everything that's happened up to this point. But this situation has been so mercurial, and Watson, his tack on this has been all over the place. He and his camp have been all over the place. Rodgers showed up to camp. Rodgers is going to play. So if you show up to camp not planning to play, I'm just not quite sure how that works.
I think it's all changed with the CBA. And I could be off on this, but I think that the owners just have so much leverage now that if you miss any time by your decision, then you're getting fined. But if you miss time because it's the team's decision, that's all good. Like the teams and the owners are just in control of just about everything now. And that's not going to change for the next 10 years, it feels like. I mean, again, I think part of it is the reports of, the Texans are now willing to listen to offers. Yeah. No crap, that hasn't changed
for a while.
That's been that way since Watson said he never wanted to play for them ever again last February, and then things changed along the way in March, April, and May on his personal side. And now unless a team wants to get ahead of everyone else, I don't think he is on the move until after the season is over. I think
after this is resolved, because he might not do depositions until February based on the latest report.
Right. That's what I mean.
So it could be, who knows? I mean, that's the thing, is that if Watson if Watson and his camp just wanted to get on with his football career, then there's a way that they could have been in there at this point. If they're convinced of his innocence so much that they will string this out as long as it takes to get a clear 100% clean, zero fault admitted, zero settlement paid. Who knows how long this is going to take?
Yeah.
So, okay, before we turn the page to all kinds of other fun stuff, and then that's kind of a downer. And we're excited because football's back and there's exciting things. But it's just these situations, they stay the same for months and then they seemingly move or not. The way you can get ahead of these situations, take advantage of it. Football Guys Players Championship, $350 to enter, $500,000 grand prize. 3.7 million total prizes. It sells out every year, folks. Get your spot. Get a 3-pack of teams. Say $50. 3 for $1,000. And I know some people say this is why you shouldn't draft until September 5th or what have you. But there's also the advantage of being ahead of the curve and locking in that knowledge. Another way you can do that is at Underdog, Best Ball, and you got Josh Norris at the control panel there, pulling the levers, pressing the buttons. It's fun, man. Seeing you putting together something really cool over there as Underdog is also. And of course with Best Ball, I mean, isn't that the name of the game with Best Ball? You should be doing some Best Ball drafts just to know the landscape. Even
the best preparation is the best research for that one season-long league that you care about with your friends and buddies.
Absolutely. You'll have your instincts, your reflexes will be honed if you just do Best Ball draft a week to see where everybody's at. But also, you can turn a tidy profit or otherwise show your dominance, show your ability to be ahead of the curve. It starts with quarterback situations. We talked about Deshaun Watson forever. Maybe Houston is still a 10-foot pole offense based on these things. Maybe you're not as hesitant to take Jalen Hurts or Tua Tagovailoa, thinking, this probably won't get resolved until next year. But there are other quarterback situations to decipher, Josh. Let's start with New England. In all these quarterback situations, if you're playing fantasy football the right way, at least, your belief about the quarterback situation should then trickle down to your valuations of players. And the uncertainty, we all split in the difference with these ADPs, Josh. So taking a stand, if you're right, is how you profit. New England, what do you see?
It was brutal last season. It was unwatchable. It was broken. They could create no rhythm at all. And what's been fascinating about the Patriots is that in the last 2 years, they couldn't be more drastically different. So you wonder, well, what do they want to be in 2021? Because they go and make a whole bunch of signings to show you that they want to be different. Because in 2019, in Brady's last year, as the train goes by, they were, I think, the highest neutral pass rate or one of the highest neutral pass rates in the league. And then last year, they were obviously one of the most run-heavy teams in the league. I talked to Phil Perry, who does a great job of covering the Patriots, and he says that they most likely will be closest to the Browns among NFL teams. So that's going to be back to a run-heavy approach. It's going to be multiple 2 tight end sets. And to me, that spells well. I know we're talking about quarterbacks here, but that spells really well for Damian Harris. But then Damian Harris's ceiling is possibly capped once they get to the red zone because of which quarterback could be on the field. Sig, this is the difficulty It's not a difficult job, but this is the difficulty of our jobs. For a decade, I was a Cam Newton apologist. And then now feel like I'm one of the few that's saying he's just absolutely broken. And it wouldn't shock me at all if Mac Jones just goes out there in the preseason, someone who was destroyed during the draft process because people assumed he was going to be the number 3 pick when he's actually talented. He's actually good behind a great offensive line and attached to Josh McDaniels and 2 great tight ends and Nelson Aguilar. And keep going on and on. If he just wildly outplays Cam Newton, who I think is kind of a broken quarterback at this point.
Right. Yes. And for most of OTAs, he was until the last day of OTAs and this great cinematic twist. And I think when we project this situation, even if Newton, and in some ways we're psychoanalyzing Belichick, because probably what Newton is going to give you is a handful of days, either in preseason or camp, that are better than Mac Jones could ever do or dream of doing in his career. And then all the other days, Mac Jones is just going to be more consistent and better at running the offense and unlocking the value of the excellent offensive line, like you said, the tight ends, the wide receiver, the running game, all the things that fit in how they draw up how we're going to win a game. And I think, like you said, Newton's probably a broken quarterback at this point. We can make some excuses for him, the absolute lack of talent around him last year, COVID, and so on. But even if he does hold the job week 1, you wonder how long. If they know that it's not Stiddy behind him, it's Mac Jones who can take the plays from the whiteboard to the field and execute them in a way that Josh McDaniels will probably like a lot. And it's really Damian Harris. You mentioned Damian Harris. Because, week to week, Hunter Henry is, again, this is where best ball is nice. Hunter Henry, Johnny Smith, Nelson Aguilar, these guys have value in best ball. In your typical leagues where you have to count on someone week to week, this is going to be frustrating. Like you said, a low volume pass offense. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I think they're all underrated because, again, I think we forget the week to week elements of watching these teams last year and just look at it like as a whole, like as a full picture. And this is where these guys finish. That's how we should draft them. When you thought about the Patriots last year, I remember watching like the Raiders game and a few others. Everything had to be manufactured. Everything.
Yes. First down.
I mean, it was like pop passes to Julian Edelman, handoffs to Julian Edelman to whatever, all that stuff. And so because of that, it wasn't even close to what they want to be this year.
Right.
And if they have a quarterback, if Cam Shorter is somehow fine in the first few weeks, or if Mac Jones just wins this, everyone immediately is a value. And I'm even pointing to Nelson Aguilar, who's going as wide receiver 62 on Underdog. And I have him all the way up around wide receiver 48. I mean, if he's your wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, wonderful to me, especially as wide receiver 5 territory, because he's going to be on the field every single snap. If they run a ton of 12 personnel, which they're going to lead the NFL in this season, then you're going to have Nelson Aguilar on the field, who was legitimately good last year. And so while Cam hasn't been able to throw 20 plus yards down the field since his final few years in Carolina, again, if Mac goes in there and if Mac is a starter, then you have someone who can still be somewhat volume dependent, but also have his window and ceiling opened up a bit from Nelson Aguilar. And you're getting a true number 1 wide receiver on a team for a wide receiver 5 or wide receiver 6 price. That's really appealing to me, but not exciting to many people out there, but really appealing.
Right. I hear you. And if Aguilar can be a consistent field stretcher and the shot plays are there because they were there for him last year, and certainly the way Aguilar's paid is going to give them an incentive to push him out on the field. But I think stepping back, and I say a lot at this time of year, maybe I should say it all year, Josh, draft offenses as much as you're drafting players, right?
And avoid bad offenses.
Right.
Avoid bad offenses and bad teams.
Yeah, teams that are good. It's kind of like, given the material you have to work with, are you going to make more out of that or less out of that than an average coaching staff? Anyway, embedded here in your New England takes are this offense has to be better than last year. It's just a question of how much better than last year. It could be wildly better than last year. It was the most dysfunctional offense. The Steelers at the end of the year were pretty bad, but it was the most dysfunctional offense. I got to get to that as an neurotic Steelers fan. And let's do real quick. And if we don't need to get necessarily into detail, although of course, feel free to say whatever you want about it, but tell me if that statement, okay, this offense has to be better than last year. Okay. Tell me if that statement applies for the following teams. We do like lightning round style. Okay. New York Jets.
Yes. I love dipping my toe into the unknown. And I would say the Jets pieces, maybe they make a really nice product at the end of it, a possible future top left tackle in this league, someone they trade up for at left guard, a offensive coaching mind who is the younger brother of the head coach of the Packers and who's worked with Kyle Shanahan, who we all view as a top 5 play caller in the NFL. You have a rookie we're really excited about, an Elijah Moore pass catcher, and Michael Carter. Like, again, it's a total unknown, the entire element, but with only one player going in the top 100 in ADP, I love to dip my toes in the unknown, and the Jets are absolutely there. And it's already baked in, the unknown elements are.
Just as long as Zach Wilson signs any day now, any moment now, he'll sign. The post Adam Gase bounce and competent coaching, which kind of is saying the same thing twice in a row. Okay, this offense has to be better than last year. The Rams.
It's so funny to me that the football collective argues within itself, like in the same day, where people catch up to how big of a deal it's going to be with Matthew Stafford being a part of the Rams. And then another part of football Twitter believes they need to tell you that, well, now Matthew Stafford's overrated because of that take. Look, in 2019, 2018, Jared Goff was 4th in passing yards and 6th in passing touchdowns in the NFL. And then in 2019, he was 3rd in passing yards. Jared Goff, okay, a guy who had to have training wheels on during his entire tenure there, who rarely made a play outside of structure, that he had to have a perfect situation to succeed. And he had that in 2018. Now you have a player who can activate all the eligibles, a quote that Jordan Rodriguez thrown out because Sean McVay keeps mentioning it. A guy who's had to deal with pressure during his entire career and stepped up to it, especially in game-winning scenarios in Matthew Stafford. I'm not saying that Matthew Stafford has to be a lot better than Jared Goff. If he's just as good in like inside of structure and offers those out of structure elements, Matthew Stafford, where he's going right now in drafts too, around like quarterback 11 or 12. I mean, the sky is the limit to me of what that tandem can do. And I think, Sig, part of the reason why it's flown under the radar is because we had 5 first-round quarterbacks, and that was on a trade that randomly happened in January. And it could be, maybe we look back in this January, as the biggest differentiator of the entire season with Matthew Stafford landing with Sean McVay and the Rams.
Yeah, as you laid out, it's that now McVay feels like I can run my whole playbook. And what does that add to the offense in addition to however better you think Stafford is than Goff? Okay, this offense has to be better than last year. San Francisco.
San Francisco is a tough one because I think if Kyle Shanahan and if Trey Lance fits the evaluation that Kyle Shanahan had for him, and he's just said, you know what? When we need to throw it, we're just going to throw it. If it's going to be a recreation of that Packers playoff game a few years ago when Raheem Mostert went for like 220 and 4 touchdowns, we can do both of those. So there's a path for the 49ers to have a top 3 offense in the NFL. I want to get your feeling on this because right before we got started, Kyle and John Lynch had a press conference where they said, well, Jimmy's going to be the starter and Trey Lance is competing for the backup quarterback job.
There's no open competition right now, is what he said. No
How many times
open
have we heard
competition
that, though?
right now.
You and I have been doing this for a little bit. We're not that old, but check back with me after 4 weeks of preseason practice, training camp. And if Trey Lance goes out there and absolutely balls, because we know who Jimmy G is, we know that Kyle, when he had the best roster in the NFL, they got to the NFC Championship, they got to the Super Bowl, but then his quarterback was the one who failed to make plays in the first, second, third, and especially fourth quarter of that contest, who has been unavailable to play basically in these last 2 years. I'm not so sure if Kyle is frustrated publicly about Jimmy's play. He's frustrated about his inability to stay in the field, but then also the element that Kyle has to have in his head is, look, other than 1 year in Atlanta, 1 year with RG3, I have not been great in touchdown rate in the red zone. Now I'm going to have Trey Lance plus Trey Sermon plus Raheem Mostert, plus Deebo Samuel, plus George Kittle, and Trey Lance can unlock all of that inside the 10-yard line magic. And so having that on the field, I think could take the 49ers an extra level this year.
Yeah, just give me a reason, right? That's what Kyle Shanahan's saying. Just give me a reason to put Lance out there. And Jimmy can continue to give him zero reasons to do that. Does Jimmy Garoppolo have in him that steely constitution? I don't know. I just keep coming back to Robert Griffin III's rookie year with Shanahan in Washington and the ragtag bunch of guys he's with. This is a team with Alex Mack, Trent Williams on the offensive line, all those names that you mentioned. I'm excited. I'm excited at the possibility of what this offense can be. And like you said, it could be, maybe it won't be a lot better. I don't know. Or it just has to get better than what they had last year with the quarterbacks that were marching out there. But it could get a lot better, even if we think it might also only get a little bit better if Trey Lance is a little bit overwhelmed. Any strong feelings on that same topic on Chicago? Because remember, how much does it mean to no longer have to be saddled with Mitchell Trubisky?
Chicago's a tough one because even though we think that Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy made a good decision in drafting Justin Fields, I think they've also proven that they might not be capable of making two good decisions in a row. And that's starting Justin Fields earlier. It seems like they're totally tied to this Alex Smith, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Dalton, Justin Fields dynamic. But that changes a lot when you go, 2-5,
right?
And your butt's on the line in terms of your job, and we need to make things happen on the field. The Anthony Miller trade does nothing to this, but I've been all over Darnell Mooney this offseason. Yes. And it's not just because I like his talent as a number 2. It's because the Bears absolutely love him. And while he's not perfect, he's definitely imperfect. He doesn't, have the strength of a lot of great wide receivers we see at the NFL level right now. But he is the guy that Matt Nagy is manufacturing touches for near the line of scrimmage too. So good in motion. They'll do the crossing routes, short, and even behind the line of scrimmage, and he'll get some of those touches too. So what I'm thrilled about this year, Sig, is that we don't have to guess as much as last year, that we get some looks at these rookie quarterbacks during preseason action, because 1 or 2 of those games to me is equivalent to, if not better, at evaluating where they're at versus, a year of college football.
Yes. Cheers to that. I want to stay on that topic. But before we do that, I want to remind everybody, it's a lot. The fire hose is turning on. It's July 27th. 29 training camps open today, I think, Josh. 29. The fire hose is going to be on. To keep up with the fire hose, sign up for the Football Guys email list. Totally free. Cecil, Lammy, you know him. Joe Bryant, you know him. You know me. We give you our takes on the news of the day. Sometimes you get special access to insider content just by being on the email list. You can unsubscribe anytime. Just go to footballguys.com and you can find it from there. Email update link. Okay. So preseason, I want to just throw it open-ended here, Josh, because there is going to be so much coming out of training camp, so much coming out of preseason. Give me something, wherever your mind goes, when I say what you're on the edge of your seat waiting to hear out of a training camp, so you can adjust your ranks, you can adjust your takes as we march. Yeah.
Well, just to dive into the news here, I'm excited to see what Jordan Love actually looks like on an NFL field, and just the chaos that might ensue if he is absolutely awful. I'd be here for those electric headlines. I'm sure you would be too, Sick.
Yes. Well, and Jordan Love, I'll just close the book on the Jordan Love take like this. And everything's fine, and Aaron Rodgers is going to play, and it was all much ado about nothing. So congratulations to everybody out there that for months have been hammering the position of it's much ado about nothing, because again, there was some profit to be made for having belief in your convictions that it was all just a bunch of drama, but nothing was really going to change. With Jordan Love, I've said this before, but I like to dwell on it for a second, Josh. Oh my, how the football gods have picked him for a tough road to hoe, he didn't ask for this, So, like you said, it's a preview. 2022, it looks like. Sounds like all the focus here has been Aaron Rodgers getting out of his contract so he can be free next year to, I don't know. We'll see. Not be with Kyle Shanahan. I don't know where he'll end up, though. All these destinies intertwined. Watson, Rodgers, Tunga Vailoa, Jalen Hurts, etc. So going back to training camp or tying these things together, let's tie together, like you said, the news of the day and the reveal that's coming in training camp. Michael Thomas. We've got to touch on Michael Thomas.
Yeah, and we probably need to talk about the Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill
dynamic
too, because that would have been a big training camp reveal too.
Yes.
At the end of it, who's named the starter, what Jameis Winston really looks like in this offense. The more I think about it, Sig, one, I mean, who knows what Jameis has looked like behind closed doors for this last year? It seems like he took a major affinity to Drew Brees, but I even talked to Nick Underhill, who does a great job covering the Saints. And he mentioned that Jameis didn't get a ton of reps last season, so they don't even know how much is different to him. And if no one is a bigger advocate for Taysom Hill than Sean Payton. Now, this news about Michael Thomas is news to us, but it kind of sounds like the team has known about it since June. But part of me believes the more I think about it, the more I wonder. I mean, Jameis was great for us in terms of a top 5 quarterback in fantasy points per game, propelled, the number 2 and number 3 wide receivers in fantasy points per game. But that was the longest leash of all time with 30 interceptions. I think Sean Payton was willing to go there with Michael Thomas on the field. But I truly wonder what Jameis Winston to Saquon Smith, Marquez Callaway, and whoever else, Adam Troutman on the field, what that would look like. So I wonder, while we have to speculate if Jameis can rein things in, why aren't we also asking the question, can Taysom Hill improve? Can Taysom Hill take the next step in terms of his processing, in terms of the speed of his play at the decision-making at the quarterback position? And if that's the case, I think if things go awry in the first few games, Sean Payton's going to go up to his whiteboard or in his brain and say, okay, this isn't working because Jameis on the field just doesn't have the weapons for him to operate at a high level. I'm going to go into the lab and manufacture production. I'm going to manufacture yards and points. And the way to do that is the combination of Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara. That's where I think this is headed now.
Well, you're right to focus on Kamara. Actually, I went back. I'm moving Kamara up on the Thomas injury. I just don't. I mean, when I say moving up, I mean his projections move up. Is it enough to move him up into the number 3 spot? I don't think you should move him ahead of Dalvin Cook. It could be very good for him because, as you said, the offense runs through him. The Taysom Hill, Jameis Winston thing is another one where it's kind of a hall of mirrors. Depending on who you're listening to, you get a different picture. There's different explanations for why things have gone the way they've gone in the past. And, Josh, even if you look at through the lens of, well, this is going to be a defense-driven team. This team has a good offensive line. This team, when Drew Brees was out, with Teddy Bridgewater taking care of the ball, they were able to win games. They were a good team. The NFC's wide open. Once they get into the tournament, if they can get into the playoff tournament, hey, they have playoff experience. There's no reason this team can't make a run. But what do you do about quarterback? And even if you said, well, then the important thing is not turning the ball over, right? Okay, we can't go with Jameis because the important thing is not turning the ball over. Taysom Hill can't hold on to the ball. Taysom Hill, if you put Taysom Hill out there for an extended time where he's touching the ball on every play, that could be disastrous. I think even Ben Valin's report that said Taysom's going to get the first shot, it's always conditional, right? Like Taysom, even if Taysom wins, it's kind of week to week from that point on. Winston's always in the background. But again, it is important. Well, I would have said it was important for Michael Thomas. Is it important for Kamara if Hill's the starter? Again, I don't know how long that's going to be. It's hard to project this offense and split the difference because especially with Thomas. And look, by the way, Thomas, real quick, because best ball, right? I don't know how far Michael Thomas has to fall in a draft for me to take him right now. Best ball or lineup setters, probably not far enough. What do you think?
2 things. I wonder if this is Sean Payton's 2020 Bill Belichick moment of, okay, we've had a good run here. We've won 11 games, 13 games for like 4 or 5 or however many straight seasons. I got to bite the bullet on this season. I think that's possible. You're talking playoffs. You're talking just getting in the dance. I think Sean Payton is also a realist, and he probably will know early on in training camp if this is even a potential winning season on his hands.
Right.
You know, look, they even chased Tom Brady last offseason, you know, so that is entirely possible to me. That doesn't mean Sean Payton's a bad coach. It doesn't mean Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels are bad coaches because it happened to them last year. It just doesn't happen to those teams as often as it does to others. About Michael Thomas, this is a tough one. And it's deep. I have him all the way down as wide receiver 47 right now. Right. To me, there's like a pretty clear drop off of wide receivers that I'm like amped to take. That ends around the like Elijah Moore's, Rashad Bateman's, Darnell Mooney's,
Mecole Hardman.
Oh, I'm saying don't bring up that name to me. I'm out. I can't do it. Like at first, when we first heard, like if he was only going to miss 5 games, I'd probably have him closer to like where, I don't know, Cortland Sutton is. Mm-hmm. But now that it seems like it's half the season, if not more, and we know ankle injuries, especially this one, it's so rare because it's on the inside of the ankle, not the outside, that it's as soon as I get to a point of, oh, I guess I'll take this wide receiver, but I'm not in love with this guy. You know that mindset you get when drafting? Like, dang, Elijah Moore just went off the board. I'm not excited. I know we talked about them earlier. Nelson Aguilar, the Jarvis Landrys, the Corey Davises. You know, I'd be more okay with taking Michael Thomas in that range. What about you?
Yeah, at that range. You know, we're talking, 10th round or something, or after that. I don't think he's going to last that long. I think maybe the 8th round is when you start to think about it, after guys like Robbie Anderson, Tyler Boyd are gone. But even then, you know, Devontae Smith, he could be a compelling guy. We're on the same page, I think, Josh, in that most drafts, he's not going to fall down to the part of the draft where Nelson Aguilar is going off the board, you know, or even Elijah Moore, to be honest, because of the name brand value. But it's just all bad. Everything emanating out of Michael Thomas, that little corner of the ball universe, it's been bad since the beginning of last year, and it was bad luck. He was in on a meaningless play. They had already beaten the Bucs. I'm sure Sean Payton is in some ways haunted by that, but in some ways it opened the door for the relationship between him and the team to break down, and that's a whole separate issue. But this is not going to help. From all outward indications, Thomas was supposed to go and get a follow-up to determine if he needed surgery, and he just didn't. And then he went to OTAs, and it was great too, because I love this because it allows me to highlight Dr. Gene Bramall. Love Dr. Gene. And Jason Wood, because at the beginning of the month, again, I love being able to have access to the staff of Football Guys, because the brain cells are always popping out something or other. Woodrow could not find confirmation that Thomas actually had surgery anywhere. And Gene said, wow, if he did have surgery, it's amazing that he was out doing a lot of stuff in OTAs. That should have been a red flag, right? Between those two very level-headed minds, putting those two things together, and here we are. So, Football Guys, love it. And we are going to have a lot of those puzzles to solve, or at least do our best to solve. I'll tell you another one that's good, Josh, that I want to just tee up for you, because where do you start with your draft preparation? What slot did I get? This year, man, even if you're picking like 9th, 10th, 11th, you might have to consider Saquon Barkley. You might even have to consider him in the 2nd round. Even if you don't like him at 11 or 12, he might still be there. Where are you at? Let me take your temperature on Saquon Barkley, because there's a wide range of takes right now.
So Underdog ADP has him right around 7th overall. That's obviously after CMC, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, Ezekiel Elliott, and Travis Kelce. Mm-hmm. I have him all the way down at 11 overall. So hopefully I wouldn't wind up with him. But your point, Sig, maybe I'm in a 12-person draft and 11 other people agree with me, and I find myself at the 111, 112. And I think this is a conundrum with all of us who make rankings of, well, I mean, I know I have Austin Eckler over him. I know I have, Tyreek Hill over him. But let's say it's him and, I don't know, Jonathan Taylor and Joe Mixon or Nick Chubb. Like, if I'm at the 112, do I take 2 healthy running backs,
right,
despite having Saquon Barkley ahead? And I think that's the joy of best ball, is I can probably diversify that, because like if Saquon goes out there and is good in week 1 and has a full workload, even though all indications kind of point that the Giants are playing the long game here with the face of their franchise. I also think there's a bunch of negativity baked into a lot of the Giants right now. And I think that is valid, because it's the Jason Garrett, Daniel Jones played 14 games last season, Sig. I think he had 12 total touchdowns, if that's correct. Yes. 10 interceptions and 11 fumbles. That's Jared Goff rookie year stuff, Right. And is it going to get any better with a possible slightly worse offensive line and still attached to Jason Garrett? Sure, the Kenny Galladay addition might help, but if we're talking about buying into offenses, and especially the running back position, where you want teams that are winning games, because then in the second half, when up by 10, that's when a lot of the rushing production comes from, unless you're the Patriots, but that's rewinding. Then the Giants might not be one you want to invest in. And I think early in those drafts, I want teams that I'm really excited about their offense as a whole. Good offenses, good teams. That's what I want in my top 8 selections.
Yeah, you nailed it with the Giants. And really, if I rewind in your take, it's this idea, and I know a lot of people will nod along, those people that create content in our space, that you can have your rankings say one thing, but when it's actually the moment of truth and you're on the clock, something else takes over, that gut feeling. I would say that's your intuition, and that's a lot of knowledge. It's not just willy-nilly spin the top and see what comes up. It is actually that gut feeling in you is saying, like, maybe even though I have Saquon Barkley 11th, I probably wouldn't take him 11th. And that's one of the reasons, again, doing those reps on Underdog, Best Ball, drafts can help you. And then, as you said, running backs are very environmentally sensitive. And that's not going to be a good environment. You brought up Daniel Jones, the stat I love to trot out there. I got on a rabbit hole stat fascination this offseason, Josh. I was looking at red zone conversion percentage on passes. And, how many passes in the end zone turn into touchdowns. And the best in the league were like in the 40s. And in the 30s was good. Lamar Jackson was actually good. That was one of the surprising things. Lamar Jackson's red zone touchdown conversion rate on passes is actually very good. We can get into volume, as a separate conversation. Daniel Jones is all the way down at 7 for 54. Like 12%.
That's disgusting.
I mean, it's really bad. And that's a failure of not just Jones, but of the offense. And like you said, still Jason Garrett.
On that same path, I don't think it's being discussed enough how much of a benefit it's going to be for Matt Ryan, Mike Davis, Calvin Ridley, and Kyle Pitts to have Arthur Smith calling plays in the red zone. Because, the Falcons the last 2 years have been around like 25th or 26th in terms of red zone touchdown percentage. Arthur Smith has been top 3 in the last 2 years, and that's no fluke. The guy just knows how to put points on the board in that area of the field. So that's a huge benefit to that foursome. And then I also wonder what the trickle down is going to be for the Titans, because it's baked into a lot of their ADPs to keep that same, the 4-point plays, scoring a touchdown instead of having to kick a short field goal. Derrick Henry's going high. AJ Brown's going high. Julio Jones is going high. We think there's going to be more volume for Ryan Tannehill. But is the efficiency going to stick with the volume? So that is something that's not going to be answered during preseason, obviously, but something that's in the back of my head of this wasn't a fluke. This Arthur Smith didn't just do this for 1 year. It's absolutely been on his resume for multiple years. And the team that might need it most, or more than so many in the league, he's going to that one. And so that's going to elevate a few of those players to me too.
My take on this was Arthur Smith. Is Arthur Smith an offensive genius? And like you said, it affects your take on Atlanta and it affects your take on Tennessee. All the players on both offenses, whether you believe he's an offensive genius. And I said, well, maybe the answer to that is, well, he just uses what he has. Maybe in the NFL, that is being an offensive genius.
Yeah.
Just using what you have.
You know how this is, though. Like whenever we get hired for something, it's based on what we've done in the past that's successful. So I understand it. Like we can get on coaches and say like, oh, why doesn't he just use this player how he should be used instead of using him how he used a previous player, But it's because that's what got you to the dance. That's what got you to this job. And so I admire people that can think on their feet and change it up and have these skills and work in the surroundings and the environment that they're in right now. And I believe that Arthur Smith can do that for sure with Atlanta, because the pieces are different. They definitely are different.
Yeah.
But I think he's smart enough that he can adjust.
and I'm not going to go. I've talked about Kyle Pitts so much. I'm not going to talk about him again. But you guys know what I would say anyway.
What would you say? Just quickly.
Oh, buy.
Yeah.
Buy.
He's going around like round 5. There was a period where he was going all the way up at round 4. Like you had obviously Travis Kelce at like the 107 on Underdog 106, and then Waller, Kittle in like round 2, 3, and then people were craving that 4th tight end so much that Kyle Pitts was going there. But if I'm getting him in round 5, especially the later half of round 5, to me, Sig, that's a real sweet spot for Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, I took Waller in the second. I'm doing the Raz Bowl right now. I took Waller in the second, and I'm still thinking it's not a tight end premium, it's just PPR. I'm still thinking about taking Pitts in the 5th. I'm still thinking about it. I always emphasize this too. If you do take an early tight end, you also want to rob your opponents of an out, one of the ones who didn't take an early tight end. So, I mean, I still think Pitts is going to be closer to Kittle than he is to Hawkinson when it's all said and done. And that's assuming Kittle stays healthy.
All of your listeners are super smart. Your viewers are super smart. But I was just writing this up again this morning, and it's still stunning that, well, one, there were only 2 tight ends last season that scored over 150 points. In previous years, it had been 5 in each of 2019 and 2018. But Travis Kelce in half-point PPR, I believe, scored 110 more points than the number 3 tight end last year.
Right.
I mean, that's 7 more points per contest. That's why taking him, while it feels weird, the 106 or 107 is totally fine, and then get one running back and then go ham on the wide receiver position after that in rounds 3 through 7.
Right. Absolutely. And that's fertile territory. And yes, and the only real cost to taking Travis Kelce is you can't grab a falling Waller or Kittle. But as we said, 4th, 5th, grabbing you're not compromising your team. Pitts is everything that he could be. Let me do this housekeeping thing before we go off the rails. You're doing great stuff over at Underdog, and everybody check out Josh's show over there. You already follow him, Josh Norris. Tell me something cool that you learned from one of your esteemed guests as you've been doing the show at Underdog, churning out great content.
Well, our mutual friend Matt Harmon's going to be on the show tomorrow, so I'm sure he'll learn a lot.
Yes.
I do the show with Hayden Winks. Hayden's a very smart guy. He makes me feel old sometimes. He had no idea who Chris Chambers was.
Makes you feel old?
He had no idea who Chris Chambers was.
Wow.
I know. That felt like yesterday. So we all love to find late round tight ends that we fall in love with. I mean, it's a total wasteland, and it's so difficult to pick the right ones. Hayden found out that major correlation to fantasy points is just how often a tight end is lined up in the slot that is not in line. So while they might see a ton of time on the field, you much would rather find someone that also does not have, and this sounds so simple, but again, keep this in mind and look on PFF or wherever on their slot snap rate or out wide snap rate, because that's where the ceiling is for these types. So a lot of people are hyping up Adam Troutman right now. Last year, he played a lot in line. It was not the Jared Cook role. And this year, it sounds like he's the complete tight end, and Nick Vanette's the one who's going to be kind of that Y move tight end. So when you're trying to find these late round types that can emerge, think last year. It was Darren Waller, who's slot and out wide. It was Logan Thomas, who spent 65% of his snaps in the slot last year. So again, as we get into the preseason, maybe one of those is on the Patriots this year. Identify that, the one that is less in line and more of a pure receiving type, because that's where the upside, and maybe you can find a late round tight end there. Does that qualify?
Sure. I think that's an interesting tidbit that, again, points back to Kyle Pitts. So, as we're almost off the rails, real quick, we have just a minute before the unofficial, official off the rails segment. One guy, who does Josh Norris tell you, one guy you have to leave your draft with?
I feel like I say this every year, but Will Fuller.
Yeah.
Will Fuller, the disrespect is unreal. Even after last year's career season, look, Will Fuller was last year's wide receiver 8 in fantasy points per game. He's being drafted on Underdog right now as the wide receiver 40. That's bananas. And he immediately steps onto the Dolphins as their best offensive player. Tell me I'm wrong when I say that. You can't, because no doubt he's their best offensive player, unless you think like you have an absolute incredible evaluation of Jalen Waddle. I'm just saying what we've seen. Will Fuller is the best player on the Dolphins. And A lot of people say, well, it's because he's attached to Tua. That bias is already baked into that. I'll add this. In his career year last season, it was also Will Fuller's lowest ADOT of his career at 13.3. If that drops, because there was only one player, I think, last season that had an ADOT of over 12, and it was Preston Williams for the Dolphins. If that drops down to 12 or 11, even better, because Will Fuller isn't just a vertical player.
Right.
He is also someone that can win closer to the line of scrimmage. He can win intermediate as well. Look, we're getting hyped about Jalen Waddle, maybe a couple other pieces on there. In wide receiver 4 range, getting a talent with an injury label, let everyone else think about that. Go home and draft Will Fuller. You get a PED discount because he's going to miss that first game. And if you miss in your wide receiver 4, Sig, you know this as well. Who cares? Who cares?
Exactly.
The upside is tremendous here for Will Fuller, especially at that price tag.
That's perfect. It's a great example of how one thing can totally change how we remember a player, right? Because before the PED suspension, even if he just gotten hurt, and you said, well, he still played up to his potential. He still played more than half of the year. You're still looking forward to seeing what's coming from him. But because it was a PED suspension and there's a tidy narrative, which may well be true, that that's how he was able to stay healthy, it discounted everything he did. And then you're decoupling him from Deshaun Watson and so on and so forth. But you're right. Where he's going, what he's demonstrated in the past, it's an easy proposition. It's an easy yes. And just remember, in general, in your drafts, wide receiver is going to be one of the easy yeses the farther you go into your draft. So draft accordingly. Don't load up on wide receivers too early. Go ahead.
And again, the ADOT was the lowest of his career. It resulted in the best yards after catch of his career. The screens were awesome. The slot usage was awesome. The intermediate game was awesome. I see Nick B in your chat right now asking about Mike Gesicki. I think no player needs more of a hard reset for their ADP than Mike Gesicki right now. He's going around like tight end 9, 10, or 11, depending on what draft you're in. They drafted Jalen Waddle to play his role. Unless they're going to run like 4 wide with Mike Gesicki being a true wide receiver because he played about 70 or 80% in the slot last season. Jalen Waddle is going to occupy that area of the field. Like that's why they took him in the top 6, right? So I'm out on Mike Gesicki, but yeah, I will happily take Will Fuller and Jalen Waddle this year for sure.
Okay, off the rails. I'm going to be totally self-indulgent here, okay? Because I know you like international soccer, football. But are you watching the Olympics? I'm
actually not. I watched so much of the Euros. I think I watched every single match, and I'm kind of giving myself a bit of a break right now in terms of late night television. And I'm actually doing a lot of work during that period.
Right.
So I'm watching less of the Olympics.
It's ramping up. Well, there's lots of fights of fancy I could go on right here about the Olympics. There have been some really spine-tingling moments. And much like the Euro, I don't think I watched quite as much as you did of the Euro, Josh, but I watched a lot. And I talked, when Pat Doherty was on, we talked about the Euro. So I, for those who are not international soccer-centric, the Euro was fantastic this year, though. The Euro gave us a lot to remember. Aside from Italy, we'll really remember Italy winning will be like the 6th or 7th most memorable thing at best. The Olympics have had a lot of great moments. I'll admit, I'm just going to come right out here and admit this. I cry when I'm watching the Olympics. Like when you see the amazing release of emotion, I think it's intensified by COVID and the weight right now. When you see the intense emotional outbursts of so much whenever somebody, and it's often not just the person, it's the coach, it's the teammates, sometimes it's the whole country. I know when the 17-year-old swimmer from Alaska won the gold yesterday, it was like in an auditorium. There was like a lot of teenagers, and they were just flipping out. I mean, totally flipping out. And this is something that applies to the NFL too. It embodies the immense investment that goes into greatness, not just on the part of the person that embodies the greatness, but so many other people. But tell me something else, not Olympics, not Euro, that you greatly appreciate, that is a very enriching thing for you to consume experience in your life.
Interesting. Going back to what you just said, I think what hits us, even if we don't know the people, is that we witness them accomplishing their own dreams.
Oh, what a release.
And that is such an intense feeling because hopefully all of you out there have felt that at some point, and you know it's something that can't be replicated until you get to that moment where you just feel like, oh yeah, I worked so hard without necessarily being able to accomplish this thing on a daily basis, because we can all write down tasks and make lists and do that, but that's like a life's work in some ways. And just witnessing someone else do that, it just draws emotion out of you. Like, I'll admit this, and this is ridiculous. I'll watch like American Idol and cry, because it's like the same thing. I mean, it's not the same thing, but you get what I'm saying. It's people getting to a point that they never thought they could get to or be able to picture it, but then it just hits them, and you can kind of see them processing again the path, the timeline that it took for them to get there, and then it hitting them in that moment. And you just, it's empathy in that moment, you know. You feel it with them at the same time.
It jumps off the screen, because I think that there's a gratitude, I guess, we all have, and this absolutely applies to the NFL. And one of the reasons the NFL is so compelling is that people who really do the high wire act out there, where you're risking failure all the time to try to achieve greatness, it's unbelievably intimidating to consider that, to consider risking so much. And I think in the NFL, well, that's what we see, right? Players can have catastrophic career-ending injuries, life-altering injuries on any play every single time they're out there. Even in training camp, Teddy Bridgewater on the practice field had his knee blow up, you know? And for them to risk that repeatedly, moment to moment, to get to see the payoff, like you said, in some ways it gives us all hope that if you haven't experienced that moment, you can still be working towards that moment. And it's so cathartic to watch that in the Olympics. And like you said, there's a really good documentary, I think it's called Afghan Idol or Afghan Star, takes American Idol and then mashes it up with like just a little bit post-Taliban. I don't know if it was really even totally post-Taliban Afghanistan, but they were able to put together like an American Idol style competition in Afghanistan, where until previously, like leading up to when the film was made, it was illegal to dance or sing there, you know? And now you're having this competition where all these people are embracing their love of music and having music come through them, when it was something that means, especially for women, to be executed, you know? Go ahead.
This is completely veering off this.
Yeah.
Can I make a pitch for everyone out there to watch some soccer in your life?
Sure.
Because I used to be that person, like, oh, they dive. Oh, they don't
They do in basketball too, by the way.
You know, I used to be that person. And then I got so invested in this one club in Aston Villa, and you watch them from the moment that they come to the club. So, you know, the expectations that they have and like their progression of their career, that you're attached to that. But the coolest thing to me, and this isn't the same. Well, one, we all know like representing your country on that scale is amazing. Right. And so that's why the Euros and the Olympics and everything is so exhilarating. But then even at the club level, it's so, I get so attached to it, because you can have just a lineup of someone from Ivory Coast, Brazil, Egypt, France, England, you know, Burkina Faso, Belgium. Like, they're coming from all these different places, but the movement, there's no timeouts. There's no stopping and being told what to do. It's all fluid. It's art. It's poetry in motion. And it's despite all of them coming from all these different backgrounds, probably not speaking the same language at all times, yet based on body language, again, rhythm, movement, practice, teamwork, it all moves fluidly. And in those moments that there are goals or near goals or chances or stops and the intensity of it, to me, that can't be replicated, just because of all these different backgrounds of these players who all found themselves together in the same moment. It's the closest thing I've found to that reaches the top.
Yeah. And the intensity of so much being online on any play. It's difficult to score, and you can win the game and lose the game if you lose one moment. I love that, singing the praises. We sing the praises of listening to music on vinyl and watching soccer. Also, we sing the praises of Footballguys. Get your Footballguys premium subscription, folks. You sign up for TFS or season long or the All Pro. We're ramping up, and we're going to be bringing you a lot of great content. Actually, just after I finish this, the preseason watch list. We're going to go through all 32 teams. A fun ritual. It's fun to go through these rituals with you. You're the best everybody getting to serve this audience. The fantasy football audience has been very good to us, and we hope it can continue to be good to you. Underdog Fantasy Josh Norris at Josh Norris, folks. We love serving you the most because you are so very classy.